When you know, were doing graphics for Antihero very early on, did you recognize to yourself, this is significant. This is something that's going to have a lot of impact culturally within the sphere of skateboarding, and it's going to, you know, no exaggeration, change a lot of people's lives and influence a lot of people for the way that they want to live, how they want to portray themselves, what they want to be a part of. Because to me, that was a huge thing, you know, like to me, seeing the hometown heroes, like I was saying, wearing the eagle, wearing Antihero. I don't care at the time, like, is it street skateboarding? Is it transition skateboarding? Are they skating manual patch? Are they skating Doesn't matter, dude. Like, the people who I fuck with are wearing it. I want to wear it because then I'm like a part of something more. That's what it felt like when I was little. So you doing that, did it feel like that?
I mean, I definitely felt very lucky to be part of something that reverberated, you know, but it definitely didn't feel like you were changing the world. And it was, you know, it was in essence, you're working with friends and you're just trying to kind of entertain and speak to and speak with your friends, you know? And so when we're all together as art department, bouncing jokes off each other, trying different things and trying to sort of craft a vision for this company that's still a fledgling company, you know? And like, there were a lot of missteps. Like if you go back and look at some of the early graphics that I did, a lot of them weren't that good, man. It was a lot of misfires. We tried different logos that sucked. We tried other stuff that just didn't check. So like, you know, you look back at it now and it seems brave and earth-shattering, all this kind of stuff. At the time, it was my job, and I did not want to lose my job, and I really loved that job. It was the only job I'd ever had that felt like magical and important, and that you had a voice, you know? And so I just wanted to uphold the vision that Julien and John and the team had and do right by them, because they were really good at what they did and everybody loved them. You know, John Cardiel fucking mattered then, man. Like, everybody cared about everything that he did. And the team that they put together, everybody cared about all those guys, including guys they'd never heard of. Before, no one even knew Bob Burnquist's last name, and he was winning contests. They called him Bob Nar. They didn't know how to pronounce his last name, but it fucking mattered. And so the pressure was on for me and for the art department to like not drop the ball and to uphold that vision. So, you know, looking back on it now, it's it's still such a tremendous honor to be associated with that brand and to still be working with them all this time later, and to not be out of gas, because that's rare. You look at all these companies that came up around the same time, and most of them are cooked. And even the ones that are still putting shit out, their shit sucks most of the time. I don't know how else to put it. Like, you can tell the companies that still have gasoline in the tank. You can tell the companies that still have a vision and a passion. And you can tell the other ones that are cashing checks and distracted and mailing it in and just rotating the logo on their board. And so, you know, if anything, I'm just more proud to be part of something now that has been around for a long time. And I'm old. And we're still not resorting to that.
How does that happen? How does it happen that a team of people, a company, a brand can survive generational shifts, changes in popularity, changes in what's cool, changes in the trends, but you're not really changing like what Antihero is about. You're not really changing like the videos from like Fucktards, Cash Money Vagrant, Destination Unknown. Maybe the cameras get like slightly better, and then like, but the rest is like, it's the same feeling. The logo is the same. Even like the little handwriting that's used on the ads or put into the videos, it's the same shit. How does that resonate with so many people over so many different years?
Well, that consistency and that quality, it starts with Julien Stranger. It's Julien and John and their vision and their quality control. And so, you know, I don't get to mail it in. I don't get to get lazy and do some mediocre graphics or some half-baked idea, because Julien will call me out on it. And like, I'm still that 26-year-old that doesn't want to let him down. you know? And so I'm constantly pushing myself to not suck because the bar is set so high. And so it's quality control. And Julien really cares about Antihero. And Cardiel really cares about Antihero. And they're fucking passionate about it. And they don't get tired of it. They don't get lazy. So it starts at the top and it just trickles down. And if you run out of ideas or just become exhausted or have other priorities, then you'll go find something else to do. It's something that I'm passionate about and really love, and I don't want to find anything else to do. I want this feeling to last forever.
How is it working with them?
Perfect. You know, I'm spoiled for any other working relationship that have ever had, you know, because, you know, when Julien and I, and the art director for Antihero is this guy, Sam Davidson, who's hugely talented as well. He's funny, he's smart, amazing artist, amazing designer. He always takes my stuff and makes it look better, which is, as an artist, what you always hope every art director you work with is going to be able to do, is make your stuff look better. And the three of us can just bounce ideas around, and there's no egos, and there's no like bitchy bad moods. And there's like just a lot of, I don't know, mutual respect, or how else would you put it? Just sort of mutual inspiration. We all want to make each other laugh. We all want to make each other think. And so we just start bouncing ideas around, and it usually leads somewhere pretty good. Not every idea that we start with is where we finish, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of laughs. And when your goal is to make people laugh and think and maybe look at things a little bit differently, like it's not a job for everyone. And so I'm totally spoiled getting to work with people that are capable of doing that again and again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were around when they put out their first videos. You've just watched the whole thing unfold.
Yeah. I'm old. I had already been at Deluxe for a couple years by the time Antihero started and when Fucktards came out. And so that pigeon that's on the front of that box, the pigeon that's in that video, that was the pigeon that was the inspiration for the pigeon logo, you know? So it was just this small little thing.
So it was the pigeon and then it was the eagle.
Yeah. And so, you know, the pigeon was probably like maybe the third or fourth sort of, or second or third maybe sort of logo for Antihero. And internally we liked the way it looked. Like it looked good and just looked so strange on a board, like this greasy, burned out San Francisco street pigeon. But it didn't like sell like hotcakes. And so it was funny. So the guy who ran the company at the time, this guy Jeff Clint, he was kind of like the general manager of Deluxe. He was a graphic artist. He waited. This is like 97. No one has cell phones. He waited till the Antihero and Real teams were on a road trip and out of phone range, and he came in and he said, "Hey Todd, we're gonna fuck the pigeon. Just it's out of here. Let's come up with something new, something like tough and American, something that more people can relate to because the pigeon's just weird." And I like the pigeon, but like that's my boss talking. So that's what led to the eagle.
Yeah. So
sorry.
He had to wait until the others were out of town. For what reason? You don't think they would have been down, or?
I'll tell you the exact reason. It's the same reason today. Julien has final say in everything, and he'll say no to anything that he doesn't agree with. And so if Jeff had said, "Hey, Julien, we're getting rid of the pigeon. It's time for something else," he would have said, "No, I like the pigeon." So we probably wouldn't have ever even had the eagle had he not gone on the road trip. And Jeff saw an opening where he could sneak something through without having to ask for Julien's permission. Because I'm pretty sure Julien would have said, "Nah, that sounds like shit."
So you drew it out.
Yeah. Jeff and I, like, we were going through tattoo books looking for some sort of inspiration. We saw some eagle tattoos that we liked, and then I just grabbed the pencil.
Am I wrong, or has it not changed pretty much at all?
It hasn't changed at all. It's it hasn't changed at all. It's the same. It's the same drawing from 1997.
Bro, let me take this time to fucking say that logo is so iconic that I don't really know how to put into words how iconic it is, but I'm going to tell you this. There was like a DVS demo at my local park, years ago, indoor park. And we had a local ripper who fucking killed it on transition, like for real though. Like he was nasty. Good style, could do every trick ever, super fast, everything. My fucking mom and grandma came because they didn't want their 12-year-old son going to this shithole where there's like people who are like just everywhere all gnarred out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I go there.
They're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I go there and there's the local ripper. And this park is like almost on some, like, it's not on some Skatopia shit, but it's like some of the ramps are fucked up. And like there's like death ramps and shit that you'll just get fucked up on. I remember there was a quarter pipe that had no skate light on top of it.
Yeah.
So if you, and people would still just go right into it, like use it to transfer, whatever. And this dude was there and my grandma and mom were like on one side of the park and there was like a bowl on the other side. He came up with a crazy frontside air, grabbed his board, came back in. He was shirtless, long ass hair, mad sweaty. Boom, did the grab. They seen the eagle logo.
Flash the logo.
They seen the eagle logo. Yo, I went home with them and they were like, they speak Spanish.
Yeah.
My grandma only speaks Spanish, and she was like, "Yo, who is that eagle man?
Right.
Who's that eagle man?" They just kept calling him Eagle Man. To this day, they still remember and they call him Eagle Man.
That's great.
And I'm like, bro, that's because of the fucking anti-hero logo.
Right.
That's, if they can see that and they don't forget it and they just saw it for a flash, that logo's fucking powerful. And it's kind of crazy that it just came out the way that it did. Like you had to like go through, like sneak behind Julien Stranger, tattoo book, drew it one time, and it was, in my opinion, perfect.
Well, thanks. It's a good thing that guy didn't do a grind instead, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. Yeah. You'd be talking to the guy who created Wet Willie right now.
So crazy. Is it wild to look back on that time period of you getting that job and doing all this?
It's, I feel very lucky, you know, and, you know, I think about it all the time, and also I sort of have to because, unlike most people, I haven't grown up. You know, like I'm still doing the same stuff I was doing when I was for livings, when I was like, you know, whatever, 26 or something, you know? And so I think about it a lot. And as I have a lot of friends who are artists and met a lot of people that are frustrated artists. And the fact that I was lucky enough to find a home for my weird vision and weird sense of humor or sensibility, whatever you want to call it, it's unbelievably fortunate, you know? So I never take it for granted, and it's why I continue to work really hard at it. Like I really push myself, and I try not to ever mail it in, because I feel like if I start doing that, someone else hungrier is gonna grab my job, you know? So yeah, no, I'm extremely lucky, and I owe all of this to, you know, Jim and Tommy, who created Deluxe and who hired me, and Julien and John, all the anti-hero writers that have all, you know, the team is what keeps the brand alive. It's not the graphics. It's the team. And the stuff that I do lasts because of Cardiel and Burnquist and, you know, Grant Taylor and everybody in between. I'm just lucky enough to be associated with them. I'm you know, I'm the doodler in the closet while they're out there doing the real work.
What was the original team?
Let's see. At the start, it was Julien, Cardiel, Sean Young, and Eric J. was Am. Yeah, was that it? And then Bob got put on pretty much at the same time. They saw him skating in Vancouver and grabbed his ass. And then the next writer after that was Andy Roy. So after about, you know, maybe a year and a half in, they grabbed Andy Roy. And yeah, I'm going to make sure that's right. I'm not forgetting anything. But it was Julien, John, Sean Young, yeah, and Bob Burnquist. Yeah, and then Eric J. was an Am for a long time. And then Andy Roy got on. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like Bob Burnquist's part in one of the old videos where he's skating. It starts with him like he's skating to an instrumental, but it's not really an instrumental. It's like an instrument. And it starts with him skating in Brazil, I believe, like in a favela. It looks like.
And I think it's Brazilian music that he had. I think he had a relationship with he knew the musician, and so he curated that part.
Yeah, he does like a front side flip to front disaster in this like cement mini ramp in Brazil, and there's just like kids everywhere, and like the background looks perfect. Did you ever? How was it watching the videos come out?
It was funny because they did the videos in such kind of secrecy that we would see them the day before they would come out.
Oh, wow.
You know, and they were VHS tapes. So it was like this was, I don't really remember there being video premieres for those videos. Definitely not for Fucktards, but, and not for Cow either. So it was kind of a little bit of an ambush, you know, and we'd hear that they were working on something a little bit. But Julien likes to work on videos kind of in secrecy, you know, which I understand. And then, you know, seeing the first video come out, it was unlike anything else anybody was doing. And the vomit scene in the kitchen, and the handheld stuff, and the grain. The stereo guys were doing some of that too at the time, you know. But it was, you know, it was a pretty unique vision. And so it definitely made its mark.
Which is your favorite one?
I mean, you know, the first one, just because it was so unique. I mean, the newer, I prefer the newer videos because they're longer. You know, getting to see Grant skate as much as possible is a real treat. But there was a Deluxe video that was just like a kind of a leftovers kind of video that was really good. I mean, the Cow video is real good too. So, yeah.
Is it Cash Money Vagrant, the one where they're putting the tapes into like the player inside the fucking car and picking people up, and then like their part starts?
Yes, there's that.
I like that one a lot.
There's also a little bit of that with a ghetto blaster in the first video too. The Australian tour video I really liked a lot too, and I got to do the cover of that a little bit. Yeah, that's a good question. Do I have a favorite anti-hero video? I mean, for me, it's just the first one because it's such a signature, and like, there's people in it that aren't that barely skate in it that were friends of mine at Deluxe. This guy Ruben Orkin, who was the team manager for Spitfire and Thunder, and he's in it, and he died a few years later, and he was like, he and I carpooled every day to work, and he was like, still remains like one of my all-time favorite human beings. And so having him in there was really meaningful. And you know, I think this first video. Yeah.
Has the job changed at all since the early beginnings?
The job's changed a lot since then, because back then you were drawing stuff on paper and shooting it with something called a stat camera. It basically took a photograph of the art, shot it onto film, and you cut separations, old school style, silkscreen separations on Rubylith with X-Acto knives. So it's this very slow and archaic method that you could employ a lot of different production tricks with. You could do all kinds of little tricks in the paint layer and things like that because you had a limited number of colors to work with. And none of us touched a computer. It was all by hand and this camera that we shot with. So your art room had one computer guy, and they were like a wizard. You know, like they were just, what they were doing was wizardry, and we were like, yeah, that's up to the nerds, you know. And so they would output type for you and that sort of thing, but they didn't. We never sat at a computer, and then I started learning. When I moved back here and started working with Element and New Deal and stuff, I started teaching myself the computer stuff and learned it. So, and at the same time, you know, something that's changed in every industry is people now, with the pandemic especially, people can work from home on this stuff. You no longer had to go to an office. So from that standpoint, and with being able to email files and that sort of thing, it's changed a lot. But just the materials, to where now anything you dream up can go onto a board. I can do a watercolor painting. That's what I do a lot, is I do a lot of watercolor paintings because they just look so vivid and different. Back then you couldn't. The screen printing process did not allow you to do that, and the color limitation didn't allow you to do that. So it's changed a lot. And And some people adapted to it and sort of fell in love with the different new possibilities. And some people didn't enjoy that stuff as much, and they would just find other industries or other places to work or whatever. Yeah.
So basically, you have to use the computer more now.
Yes. And all the stuff I do starts by hand. I still draw everything by hand on paper or whatever. The difference is that I'm then scanning it, and sometimes I'm coloring it entirely digitally. Other times I'm doing watercolor separations. It sort of depends on the effect I'm after, but there's a lot of different looks that can be achieved traditionally through the computer.
Would there be any way to go back to how it was before? Like, let's say someone wanted to do the board graphics and the process the way that it was before. Would that just be like super not possible?
Well, it's funny you say that, because Sean Cliver, until very recently, continued to do that. I think he still does it sometimes with Strangelove. He will hand cut his separations. And places like Scream and Squeegees, old school traditional board screening places that have that kinked silk screen, will still print that stuff. They're capable of it. It's just heat transfers have changed the game so much. It's so much more convenient. It's cheaper. It's very standardized. It's faster. So more people lean on that. But I could go back to that, no problem. Back to that method. It's the biggest challenge is the color count, where it's like, oh shoot, it's either got to be 5 or 6 or 7 colors or less. How am I going to do that? Because I get to have so much fun now painting so much stuff where it's just the spectrum of colors are at your disposal. So I could go back to doing it. It would just be, there's limits. Yeah.
How did you end up getting a job at Deluxe? Because I know that you went to school, right? And after school, you ended up getting some job that was, or trying to get some job that was like as an editorial illustrator. It wasn't as fulfilling as you thought it would be, and then you just ended up at Deluxe. How did all that happen?
Well, the way you just described it made it sound like I was a lot better at it than I actually was. I went to college at UC Santa Barbara and got an art degree there. Loved it, and I worked on the daily newspaper there on campus with a bunch of really intelligent, funny, thoughtful people. A lot of them have gone on to be like names in journalism, people you can see on TV now. And so I thought, well, that's what I want to do. And I was doing it every day there and like winning all these college awards and shit, and thought like, hey, I'm good at this, and got out of college and realized that like, no, I was good at it compared to other people that were 20, but compared to the rest of the world, I'm nothing special. And I'm 21, 22, and I'm sending off my portfolio to different places, and nobody gives a shit. No one's calling me back. So I was, I moved to San Francisco and just continued to work in like free weeklies. So I worked with the San Francisco Bay Guardian or the SF Weekly, doing weekly illustrations for them. But that doesn't really pay anything. It was almost like a volunteer side gig, and I was doing that in temping. And then just working in offices, just like doing file clerk shit and doing artwork. I had an art studio, so I'd paint and draw and stuff at night or on the side, but it was a pretty bleak existence. And then I found out about a entry-level job opening at Deluxe where they needed like sort of a production artist, basically. And a friend of mine who at the time worked at Slap Magazine, my friend Jamie Riley, he told me about it. And so I hustled my portfolio together and ran out there and showed it to them. And I don't think a lot of other people applied to the job. But I also told them that I was friends with Nadas, and I was being interviewed by Jim and Tommy, among other people. And they're like, okay, well, if he's friends with Nadas, then he can't be that big kook. So let's give him a try. And then once I got in, I'm like, and it paid nothing. It was a very low paying job, but it was a dream job. And so I just said, I'm going to outwork everybody around me. I'm going to be on time every day. I'm going to take this job super seriously because this is a blessing. And the real world had kicked me around pretty good by that point, and I had not had many blessings in terms of career blessings. And so I grabbed a hold with both hands and didn't let go.
So you said the first position you had was production what?
Well, they called it a production artist.
Okay.
But the Deluxe art department was so small, there was just 3 of us. Okay. So the difference between production artist and art director was like one person quitting, So I wound up, they described it as production art, but I was doing a lot of the color separations for other artists' work, but also I was drawing a whole bunch of the Spitfire wheels. Like that was one of the entry things you did was like Spitfire wheel graphics, which is ironic because they were that wheel company was and still is like the top of the industry. So like more people are seeing those than board graphics or whatever, but they didn't trust me to do any board graphics for a while. They're like, let's just see how his work looks on wheels and that sort of thing. And so I was doing that, and just doing, sort of like color separations for the other art that was being produced, and did that for about a year. But then I started doing board graphics and stuff during that time, and it was going pretty well. And they realized that I didn't suck. And then the art director there, who was a graffiti artist, pretty well-known graffiti artist in San Francisco, he was up late every night bombing, doing graffiti, and then he'd have to be at Deluxe at 8 a.m. every morning. And it was like he was burning out, and he was very passionate about graffiti, and he just wasn't that passionate about board graphics. And so he quit, and that just moved me into basically the art director position. And so I had to hire an assistant, and then it was just go time.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to get to that position?
It was a year and a half. He did, I think he and I worked together for about a year. A little more than a year. Again, it wasn't because I was so mega talented. It was because it was this tiny little art department, and I had proven that I didn't suck. But I think if they had said, hey, we need Deluxe, needs an art department, an art director, and they'd put the word out that they were hiring, they probably could have found somebody better than me, but they didn't. They just want to hire from inside, and I was cheap, so, and the person that was going to work underneath me was also going to be cheap, and things were small then, so they couldn't afford to hire somebody for a lot of money. So I happily took the job.
Do you think it was weird during that time period when there's not as many board companies as there is today? Has that changed shit? The fact that now there's just like a ton of companies coming in, the barrier of entry for making a company is much lower. Probably you could just like make an Instagram, start some videos, like the word's out, people know how to do it, and a lot of pros are doing it. And how has that changed it?
Well, yeah, I think you're right in that it's easier to start a company, it's easier to get the word out, easier to get clips out and sort of like elbow yourself a seat at the table. But in terms of success and having any kind of staying power, that's still real hard. For these brands to last, 5-6 years and establish some kind of market share, whatever you want to call it, it's still really hard. And skateboarding's in a really tough place right now. Shops are struggling. Yeah. And so to start a new skateboard company right now and trying to elbow your way in, shops are only buying the stuff that they can sell, and their backs are against the wall. So the possibilities are endless, but a lot of these new companies that start wither and die the same way they did back then, whether it's mismanagement, bad time in the economy, some kind of scumbag partner ran off with the money, it's all the same stories. Or it's just, we've got a team, we've got one really well-known pro and two guys you've never heard of, and the guy who's well-known just blow out his knee. Now what? So it remains very hard.
Yeah, so starting it's one thing, and keeping it going is a completely different animal. And having people fuck with it for more than just 5 years is even crazier. Never mind 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, and I pulled the 5-6 year thing out of my ass. I mean, it might be 2 years, like yeah. I think people's attention spans are so limited now that it's so much more of a what have you done for me lately mentality. Where are the clips? Where's the video? feed me, people
care less because there's just so much fucking content coming out
with
Instagram, and it's like you're forever connected. Like if I go onto my phone right now, I will see some new skateboarding. Yeah.
And but it's like, does the company have a vision? Does the aesthetic match with do they seem original? There's a lot of intangibles that aren't just about the talent of the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we see these companies come and go, including some amazing ones.
Yeah.
And so there's always a backstory as to why, but it's very hard to get afloat and stay afloat.
Yeah. It's pretty scary. I
guess. I mean, but everything else is the same. Fashion is the same way,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. Sassoon jeans was riding high in 1979 and they go away. You know, like there's all these, it's fashion. It's trending and what's hot now. And certain brand, you know, Deluxe is very good at keeping things steady. The backbone that company's built on is very reliable. People trust them. They make good product. They don't sell you shitty wood. And so there is a pattern of success from them, regardless of what brand it is, you know.
Yeah.
But not everybody has that, and so you got to start somewhere and sort of try and establish yourself with that kind of same reputation. It's tough.
Yeah, you were talking about how skateboarding's in a tough spot right now. What do you exactly mean by that? What's going on? I was talking to my friend who runs a shop, and he was telling me about, you know, just the struggles of running a shop and how it is, and the things I've heard all kind of point to that. Like skateboarding's in a tough spot.
Well, it's in a tough spot financially.
Yeah.
And you know, the way it seems to me, and not that it matters what I think, but the way it seems to me is people have been convinced over the last couple of years that the economy is tight, that things are tough out there. And skateboarding is fueled by disposable income, you know, because there's adults like us that can make our own money and buy our own decks, as you know, whenever we can afford $65 or whatever it takes. But most of it, you know, the entry level stuff and the stuff for whatever 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old is parents are going to hook me up, hopefully, or help me out, you know?
Yeah.
And when the parents have been convinced that the sky is falling and the economy is toast, then they're going to be less confident to spend something on what they consider to be disposable income. You know, like, no, you can make that other board, that flexed out board last another 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And so skateboarding itself is doing great, but the brands and the economy of it and shops are struggling because they're having a hard time selling decks, they're having a hard time selling stuff because parents and adults have been convinced that the economy is in a tough spot. Is that entirely true? It's not entirely true. Inflation's down, unemployment's way down, but the same thing that got us an absolute moronic, lying idiot elected to the presidency last week based upon lies and basically, in essence, shit-talking, got him into the job again. That's the same thing that has people convinced that it's horrible out there and our economy is wrecked. The numbers don't add up to that. It's a lie that the economy is wrecked. What is truthful is that people are afraid. And they're afraid of the economy being wrecked, and they're afraid of being overextended because I don't know what's next.
Yeah.
And that you got to respect and understand. But when the whatever they call it, consumer confidence, when consumer confidence is down, skateboarding is very badly affected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's probably just crazy fear, which leads to just like, yo, I'm not spending nothing.
Yeah.
And then I'm definitely not spending on a skateboard.
Yeah. And we are all held hostage by our phones and the information silos that we're thrust into in there. And so if we are buying into some of this stuff, it feeds us more of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we are, you know, our information channels become so specific and for some people so fear-driven that it soaks in. And the things you thought, like, that's preposterous. You know, Hillary Clinton in the basement of a pizza store harvesting adrenochrome from children, like that's not only a science fiction movie, that's like a dumb science fiction movie that wouldn't get green lit. And then 6 months later, there's morons that actually believe that that's true, that's possible because they're reminded of it constantly, and it's repeated and repeated. And without a filter and without an ability to step back and realize why people are lying to you, the stuff saturates. Anyway, you didn't sit down and talk to me to go down economics or socioeconomics, but here we are.
I seen one of your recent graphics. It was like anti-intelligence. It was just like a series.
Yeah.
And it was like, had to do with technology, and the feeling that I got from it was just like people super like phone right here and can't really see the rest of the world. Some dude was wearing like a computer as a hat pretty much, or as like a helmet. It was just broken over his head. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What are your thoughts on the iPhone and how connected we are now, and the state of like just being bombarded with shit on our phones? And how does that affect the art that you make?
Well, that anti-intelligence pro set from Antihero, the idea was basically like, how would humans improve themselves through technology if those humans were meth heads? You know, it's basically like, how would tweakers wire themselves, rig themselves up to be as connected with technology as possible? You know, so it's ridiculous and absurd and like sad and dark and stuff. But it's supposed to just come from like a tweaker mentality, you know? And it's funny, you know, I mean, we are all hostages to our phones now, which even whatever, 12 years ago we weren't, 15 years ago we definitely weren't. It's someone my age having seen it transform so thoroughly is wild. Whereas, you know, someone your age, you can probably remember when it wasn't that way, but not very clearly, you know? And it's like, don't get me wrong, I love Instagram. Instagram's fucking awesome. I get to connect, I get to see all this artwork by these artists that are like either really famous and see what they're working on, or completely unknowns. I get to see all this amazing work getting put out there in the world at my fingertips, you know, like I get to get really inspired by this amazing shit. There's people doing amazing shit all over the world that I get to look on my phone to see instead of having to whatever, go through a newspaper, let alone go to a museum. You know, like the reach and the things you're exposed to can be so great and beautiful. And, you know, I follow like the U.S. interior feed and just the photos of like all the beautiful parts of this country. It's stunning. So I'm not one of those people that's just going to say like, yeah, it's all horrible and it's rotten and we are and the sky is falling and I'm old and crotchety. It's not as simple as that. Instagram is a beautiful tool. For me, it's a great billboard on the side of the road that I can throw on there whatever I want, and some people will pull over and look at it, you know? Great tool for artists. It's also, I need to be very careful so that all my time doesn't vanish into it, because it's an extremely shiny object that I can light 4 hours a day on fire on there, no problem. And I won't have very much to show for it sometimes. And so I just need to make sure that my time is being spent on things that I can be proud of, you know, that I can, whatever, look back on and not be embarrassed by. So I think there's a healthy medium in there somewhere. There's a middle ground that's healthy. I think we all just need to watch how much we're on there. And also, more importantly, not necessarily trust that everybody on there with an opinion that's trying to convince us that certain things are taking place in the country or on the planet are doing it for the right reasons. And this last election is incredibly depressing for me, mostly because journalism and truth seems to be dead. And you know, I was in print media. I cared about journalism and truth and news and verifiable information. And that stuff was protected by, you know, libel and slander laws. That was protected by the law. And if you were in journalism and you lied, you get called out for it and castigated, and you'd be in trouble, and you would lose your job, and your publication would be in hot water. And that's not the case anymore. There are empires built upon lies, and there's with no reprisal. And it's just about audience building and either fear building or trying to build some kind of emotional momentum. So
it's a thing with like the algorithm too, that like what you want to see, maybe you didn't even want to see it. Maybe you just clicked it subconsciously while lurking at like the speed of light while talking to 27 people inside of a room. Before you know it, your whole shit is filled with that, and you don't really know. You might not even notice it, but now your whole shit's filled with that, and you don't really have control over it. And that's one thing. It's like, in terms of finding out what's real or fake, Me, like you said, like there was a part of my life where I didn't really have Instagram. That shit didn't exist when I was like, let's say 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old. But you're right. Like it was like for most of my life, it's like existed.
Yeah.
And it's been a thing that we've kind of like come up with. And it's just like now, I don't know how it was before, but now if I try to find out something, whether it be like, hey, is this food good for me? Or is that like, you can find that, like you'll find whatever the fuck you're looking for is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like, do I want this to be good for me? I'm going to find that it's good for me. Do I want it to be bad for me? I'm going to find that it's bad for me. And then I'm like, shit, dude, I kind of just want to know the real fucking answer. And I can't actually find it. Like, I'm aware I'm in this situation that I cannot find it. And how do I like cipher through this fat ass body of information and find what's most likely true so I can make a decision? And I think that it's a case of like social media, Instagram, and the explosion of the internet is something that's kind of new for humanity. And we're still learning how to kind of swallow and what to do with it. And it's tough, and it's affecting like all of the jobs. It's affecting how people think. It's definitely affecting the youth. Like I can't imagine being like a little kid growing up with a phone in the hand and that's what I'm used as like a toy. You know what I mean? Like I can't even imagine that. And like, in terms of skateboarding, some of the videos that came out when I was coming up, it was like Lakai Fully Flared, Volcom Let's Live. Those two videos like are Mystery Black and White, circa its time. Like I got them. They were the only videos that I had. I don't know if YouTube existed at the time or not, but if it did, it was probably really small. And I remember just watching those four over and over and over and over and over. And that was pretty much the only consumption of like videos that I would get. That's where I get my music from. That's where I'd get, but it was very limited. But in a way, like it wasn't limited because through that one video, I would learn about Jimi Hendrix. I would learn about Black Flag.
Yeah.
Then I would learn about this, that. Then I'd go to Best Buy and I would buy like the fucking Black Flag CD. And then I'd be like, I remember I went to Best Buy for the first time and I got like a Walkman CD player. And then I was like, well, I got my Walkman now. Like I might as well go to the fucking CD section and get some CDs and shit. So I go to the CD section and I'm like, what band is sick? Like, I don't know any bands. So like, what band is sick that like, you know, isn't like weird? So I go in there and I'm like, Metallica, that's pretty sick. Like, I know that like that dude, one of the characters from Beavis and Butthead wears that. And I'm like, this is like something that's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, dude, but AC/DC's right there. And so is like Slayer. And I'm like, fuck, I can only choose one right now because these are like, I don't know, $7 or something. And like, there's no way in hell I'm getting all of them. So I'm like, yo, I need to choose right now. Like I need to make the correct decision. And my mom's in like another part of the Best Buy. I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, I'm going with Metallica, Ride the Lightning. Fuck it. So then I buy it and I put it in the CD player. I'm in like the back of my mom's car. Listen to that shit. And I'm like, yo, this is fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Then they had that little sheet of paper. And this is all through like a skate video.
Yeah.
Then they have that little sheet of paper in the CD. I took it out and I started reading like the lyrics and I started reading like maybe a small bio on Metallica.
Liner notes, yeah.
But like, because that's all that I had, now I remember it. Now I have mad shit and I don't remember none of it because like, I don't care about any of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and there's a what's next element to it too, where you're like, oh, that's a cool song. I'm not going to look that up. Yeah. And it's funny for me growing up with the music that I was into. I remember I would see there'd be like a Jimi Hendrix album, you know. And I remember there was one song, and they're all, you know, he wrote all of his own songs, but I'm like, wait, what's this name? You know, Chester Burnett or something. Like, what the hell's that? And I'm like, oh, that turns out that's Howlin' Wolf. I'm like, oh, okay, that Howlin' Wolf. And it would be the same thing where you're connecting dots and going further and further into informing yourself on where the stuff comes from. And all those guys from that era were just doing sort of tributes to the guys that came before them, but I didn't know. I was fucking 13. I didn't know shit. And so you just, whatever, I'd hear it on FM radio and like, oh man, I like that song for that song. And you know, that's the other thing is radio is kind of dead. So your exposure to music changes too. But you know, your favorite skater's skating to a certain part, you know, and it makes you like that music and like I just remember there certain times where there'd be like, you know, fire hose or something that people really loved, and I remember just like I'm sorry, I think I'm the only person my age that doesn't like fire hose. I just found it super annoying, but you know, this part was to that song, you know, how could you? And I'm like, well, music drives me fucking, it's irritating, man. I find Firehouse super irritating. But you have these positive associations, and it sends you down the rabbit hole like you described.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a positive association. That's what it is. Like, I'll walk into a thrift store and hear some song that I haven't listened to in like 10 years, and I'm like, yo, this dude skated to that song. I like this song.
Yeah.
Because maybe I didn't like the song right away, but I just liked the part so much that I grew to like it. We were like training earlier, and like some song that Brandon Biebel skated to was in it, and I was like, oh, fucking shout out to Brandon Biebel. I just kept training.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. I think the overload of information makes you just appreciate all the information you have much less, because now it's in abundance. And rather than the excitement of you get the CD and you're being like, yo, next time I can either get like AC/DC, or I can get the other fucking Metallica album. I can get Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
Which one am I going to get? But then when you get that shit, you are fucking hyped, you know?
Well, especially when you don't have 20 other ones to bounce between. So
Yeah.
you're just like, I'm just going to listen to this one 4 times a day or this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And heavy rotation. It is funny how I think I just think about like how heavy I was in a certain band when I was like 13 or 14. I would just get that album and just loop it.
Yeah.
Just loop that album. And now I'm like, I can't really do that. I can't listen to an album 3 times in a row, unless it's like an instrumental or something that's jazz or something that is meant to not be focused upon. You know, that like I'm gonna have in the background while I'm working, but I'm not really highly attuned to it in the moment, you know. Whereas at the time I thought like, oh, these lyrics are so deep and like all this shit, and now I'm just like, oh, it's so embarrassing how pretentious you are when you're 13 and 14. You think like, man, I struck gold with this shit. Nobody understands this like I do. And like, no, they do, which is why they think that band is just a bunch of douchebags.
Yeah.
Like, you're just a dumb 13-year-old kid. Shut up.
What influences your art when you're like you're making board graphics, but you're also doing a bunch of other stuff. So what influences when you make it? Is it society at large? Is it like how you're feeling?
I think I've said this before, like the main influence for me is the news, you know, is what's going on in the world. I pay very close attention to that. I read the news a lot. And that gets me real good and pissed off. And that leads to most of my art. So I just get real good and pissed off, and then which I've heard like comedians do the same thing, you know, and that's sort of what I am attempting to sort of be in a weird way, but it's just kind of like visual comedy. It's not knee slapping all the time, but it's just making the most of a bad situation.
Yeah.
So that's my main inspiration. I mean, being around a lot of people at a time definitely inspires me, you know, like whatever, being in airports and seeing all the different types of people, but mostly just reading about what's going on in the world, reacting to that. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear by now how the last several weeks has affected my perspective, and I'm real fucking hopping mad. So that's a pretty steady source of inspiration.
Where do you read the news?
I read the LA Times. I read the New York Times. You know, I read like actual newspapers. I actually still have a subscription to my local newspaper. You know,
Oh, nice.
I actually hold the Los Angeles Times in my hands. I believe in those news sources. I don't believe in the debunking of you know, mainstream media and that bullshit, because those are people that have to follow laws.
Yeah.
The law requires them to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, of course there's stories that won't be reported on by certain publications because their ownership is a certain way or whatever. But generally speaking, I get it from there. There's certain historians who write regularly, whose feeds I read and that sort of thing. I don't get a lot of news from television because television news has become less about the facts and more about opinions. And it's just personalities talking about what they think these things mean, instead of just like, here's what happened. And I'd rather just know what happened and decide for myself what it all means, or attempt to anyway. So, yeah.
Do you ever feel overwhelmed when you're reading the news with like the state the shit's in, or even just the sheer volume of articles that exists?
I don't feel overwhelmed by that. I feel overwhelmed by what's going on, not the sheer volume of sources of information and whether it's true or false. I feel overwhelmed by the reality of what's going on environmentally, politically, with what women have to look forward to for the next 4 years at least, and the last handful of years with Roe versus Wade being overturned, with global warming and a lot of people in a lot of countries still denying that it exists or minimizing its impact. My sister's a marine biologist. I have friends who do it for a living, who study climate science for a living. These are good people that are, whoever's listening to this, they're fucking smarter than you. And they're not lying. And this is real. And we're all fucked. It's just a matter of how fucked we are. Yeah. And the fact that there are people who deny it or ignore it because it's inconvenient to their bottom line is extremely upsetting. So I'm overwhelmed by where things are headed. I've got daughters, and they're in their early 20s, and I want them to be able to live happy, healthy lives. And that's looking increasingly difficult to uphold. Mm-hmm. So that's overwhelming to me.
Yeah. How do you feel about like animal welfare and stuff like that? I see that in some of your art, there'll be like animals, I guess, winning like, against humans.
Yeah. I've done a lot of that. I grew up spending a lot of time alone and catching lizards and snakes and playing with cats, and I was just kind of like a kid in the mud a lot of the time, kind of a weirdo, like kind of a pig pen from Peanuts, like just a kid who walked around with dirt all over him a lot of the time. And as a result, I was not Mr. Popular growing up, but I've always had a tremendous love of nature and animals, and a tremendous disgust toward how things are headed for them. You know, habitat encroachment and reduction, air quality, water quality stuff. And so I want the animals to win. I want people to die off a little bit. I want sort of justice to be served. And, you know, I do it in a funny way, or try to do it in a funny or sort of ironic way, but that's where it's coming from. I'm rooting for the animals.
Yeah.
You know, we've clearly shown we don't deserve the keys to the car.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's undeniable that we're destroying this planet, or at least changing it fucking crazy dramatically, like into something that it wasn't. The few books that I've read on that shit, like I think there was one called like The Green History of the Earth or The Green History of the World, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what to expect when I picked it up. And I was reading that shit, and it was just talking about, I guess, the mass extinction that goes down when humans just like show up. And it was like, you know, I always associated that with when we industrialized and when we, you know, do big things where you see a factory or something. Then I'm like, well, of course, that's like you cleared out mad shit to make that happen. But really, it was like we kind of just showed up on some like being human shit even before industrialization, and like for one reason or another, mass wipeout of species. And I went to my family's from Ecuador, and I went to the Galapagos Islands maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome! I would love to go there sometime.
And I saw like fucking, you know, real animal species everywhere that weren't just pigeons and squirrels and rats and cockroaches. And they were straight up everywhere. Like that's the easiest way I could describe it. Like they're everywhere. Like I'd be walking and there'd be like
those Galapagos tortoises are real famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or there'd be like sharks in the water,
Yeah.
and then there'd be other wild fish that I don't know what they are in the water, and then there'd be birds staring at the water, but these were not like regular birds. They were just like, I don't even know if bird is the right word, but they're like, they're huge. They're hunting. There's fucking piranhas. There's fucking everything you can imagine. There was a
marine iguanas is a famous
Yep.
one too. Those are awesome.
There was like seals chilling on the, not seals, dude. I'm fried, but like there was just some crazy animal chilling on the floor.
Yeah.
And after that trip, I was there for like maybe 4 days or something like that. After that trip, I was thinking to myself, what's crazy is that was the whole world at one point.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
maybe not the same animals, but that was like, this was like probably filled with monkeys and shit.
Right.
And like,
Yeah.
fucking,
Or at least tons of deer.
something insane, dude.
Tons of deer trucking around. Yeah, deer and mountain lion and bobcat. Yeah.
I saw a photo one time. It was the deepest wilderness you could ever imagine. Like, no one's hiking in that shit. Like, it's real wilderness.
Yeah.
And that shit said, like, Manhattan, New York City, like,
Right.
400 BC or something like that. And I'm like, damn, that's a fact.
I remember reading a book about people settling on the East Coast. The first batch of settlers, and I think they was coming into Chesapeake Harbor, but I'm not sure. It was Boston area. There's a bay there. My East Coast geography is pretty embarrassing, but they talked about the cod and the number of cod there were, the number of fish there were, and it was basically like you could just sort of throw a rock in the water and hit a fish and grab it and drag it out. And people didn't want to eat fish because it was just too plentiful, that it just seemed unspecial. And so they wanted to, eat sort of, meat and that sort of thing. But that fish were so plentiful upon arrival that you could just sort of like whack a branch into the water, any body of water, just nail a fish.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And now, of course, seeing a fish of any kind of size from the shoreline is a special event in most parts of the country.
What do you got going forward? Do you have any projects planned? Anything you're working on? Any anti-hero stuff?
Coming up, well, there's never-ending anti-hero graphics, so I've got a new batch from them launching any day, pretty much any day. So there's always gonna be new stuff. I think those anti-intelligence ones you mentioned are in shops now, but they'll be replaced by something else equally zany. So you can always watch for new anti-hero stuff. I do a calendar every year that comes out towards the end of November. I don't know when this stuff is going to see the light of day, but I do a calendar that's I do all the art for it, and I think this will be the 6th year I've done it, and so that's always something I like to try and tantalize people with. If they want to go to my website and buy the calendar, that's always fun, and it's not only full of my goofy art, but I go through and add all kinds of stupid and ridiculous dates, like famous school shootings, Crash the Hindenburg, the birthdays of all the Three Stooges, the death of Chris Farley, really important stuff. So the calendar's full of all that, and that's a fun thing that I like to get out there, and people buy it worldwide, and that always makes me feel real good. And then I don't know. I've got a screen print coming out in a few weeks too that I sell through my website. So there's that. I think I get to go to Japan in March for an art show, which will be really fun.
You've been there before?
I have been there a couple of times for work in the last, I think it was like 5 and 6 years ago.
Yeah, I've never been there.
It's so great.
That's what I hear from everybody who goes there.
It's great. It's a really fun country to visit, and the food and the culture there, it's just so awesome.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. So yeah, I mean, I do love going there. I do love to travel. There aren't very many countries that I've been to that I would say like, oh yeah, don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I find traveling to be so eye-opening and so important. I don't always do a good enough job of creating opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
When I was in my early 20s, I did a ton of traveling, and I get swallowed up by work and career stuff now. But yeah, for young people listening, like I always strongly encourage people to travel, because it will really change your perspective of your own country and your own life and what's possible, and in some cases how lucky we are, in other cases how badly off we might be.
Yeah. What would you say? This is a random side tangent, but what would you say was the thing about Japan that you liked the most, or was the most different between America and Japan?
Well, you know, it's a really like a catch-all, but the culture there, and I really love to cook and I really love to eat, and Japanese food is incredibly good, and they really care about how things present and taste, and it's a really fun country to eat in. It's a really fun country to go to bars and listen to music. There's a lot of just like rhythm and blues bars where they just are spinning vinyl the whole time. There's a real The public transit there is amazing. Taking the bullet trains everywhere is so cool and so convenient. The cities are all really clean. It's just a different experience. I also everything's very clean there and very beautiful. At the same time, like their telephone lines look like you tore a bunch of hair out of a woman's hairbrush and put it on the ground. Like it's just this crazy tangles of wires. So when you look up, I always love looking up and just staring at the telephone wire tangles or the electrical wire tangles, because it's just insanely abstract and complicated. You know, they have these little the streets are more narrow in some parts of the cities, and they have these little trucks. You know, like everything's kind of downsized and kind of, you know, they don't have the ridiculously sized vehicles that we have, or the ridiculously sized meals that we have, you know.
Yeah, they eat smaller portions.
Smaller portions, and so they're not all waddling around.
Yeah.
So it's like to say go there for the culture, it's a catch-all. I hope I explained what I meant by that.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
It's been an honor. I was really looking forward to this for many reasons, and, you know, didn't disappoint. So thank you so much.
You sure I didn't let you down at all?
No, I'm sure.
I didn't. Were you hoping for some more laughs? I didn't show up with any good jokes. You're like,
no, it was perfect. Yeah, I'm just stoked. So thank you, man.
Hey, likewise. This is super fun. Thank you. Nice to meet you.